With the news of the store's imminent closure, I've had a lot of questions from people asking what are my favourite games on the Vita. A couple of years ago, I put together this list of all the top 100 games in a series of 10 videos. Given the news, I decided to repost them as one long video featuring my top 100 games. This list is a little bit out of date. I would have added Romancing Saga 3 and Xenocrisis to the list if I could do it again, but generally it's spot on and this is a great list of games for you guys to check out. Let me know in the comments as well, what are your favourite games on the Vita?
Number 100. Shantae Half Genie Hero. The Vita has a lot of excellent Metroidvanias to choose from, and Shantae Half Genie Hero is one of the best. The variety of powers and great gameplay made this game a lot of fun. I was also a big fan of the cartoony graphics. '99. Skyforce Anniversary. Skyforce Anniversary may not have had a lot of content, but the gameplay loop of playing a stage, earning money, upgrading your plane, and trying again was so addictive and enjoyable. '98. Mary Skelter Nightmares. This first-person dungeon crawler RPG had surprisingly deep gameplay mechanics and an intriguing story. The world was especially unique, and I liked getting to know the different characters. The levels felt overly long at times, but other than that, it's a great game. '97. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. We won't be getting the full Bloodstained game we were promised, but at least we have Curse of the Moon, an 8-bit game inspired by the NES Castlevania games. It's short, but it's also really good. '96. Cinemora. The Vita has a lot of excellent shoot-em-ups, but Cinemora holds up as one of the best. Great graphics and a good level of challenge make this worth the asking price. '95. Dead Nation. The first twin-stick shooter to show up in my top 100 games list is Dead Nation. While it doesn't play as well as the PS4 version, it's a tough and entertaining shooter with a good variety of weapons to take down the hordes of zombies. '94. Unfinished Swan. Unfinished Swan was such a unique experience. Painting the world with colour to figure out where to go next and how to solve puzzles never got old, and I enjoyed learning more about the story. '93. Super Mutant Alien Assault. I really enjoyed Super Mutant Alien Assault. This fast-paced 2D platformer shooter is addictive and challenging. Every time I died, and I did die a lot, I wanted to jump straight back into the game. '92. The Swindle. The Swindle is a steampunk heist game where you have 100 days to successfully execute enough burglaries and collect enough cash to upgrade your equipment and take on the big heist and shut down the police's new spy machine. It's a lot of fun with a great premise, but there are performance issues which spoil the game a bit for me. '91. One-Way Heroics. The objective is simple in this turn-based roguelike. Travel right on the screen and take down the boss at the end. Of course there are enemies to deal with along the way, and loot to find. It's not easy, and getting the hang of the mechanics can take time, but if you put the time in, you'll find One-Way Heroics is a deep and satisfying game. 90. Ninja Gaiden Sigma. Ninja Gaiden Sigma was one of the Vita's launch games, and an excellent demonstration of the power of the Vita to play console games. The graphics looked great, and the difficult fast-paced action was just as fun as when I played it on my PS3. '89. XCOM. There's no denying that graphically and from a performance perspective, XCOM on Vita is significantly inferior to the console versions, but the gameplay is intact and just as good. It's also amazing the game is even playable on the Vita. This sci-fi turn-based strategy game is perfect for playing on a handheld, with short levels and lots of replayability. '88. Don't Starve. I find survival games can get old fast, but I really enjoyed Don't Starve and couldn't stop playing it. Trying to harvest food, gather resources while trying to avoid enemies could be frustrating at times when things go wrong, but the objectives of trying to unlock all the characters kept me hooked. '87. Age of Zombies. In Age of Zombies, you play as Barry Steak Fries, as he travels through time killing zombies. This twin-stick shooter is a lot of fun and also funny. It's easy to pick up and play for a few minutes, but it's also very easy to sink loads of time into, especially playing the survival mode and trying to chase those high scores on the leaderboards. '86. Severed. I'm not normally a fan of touchscreen games, but in Severed they work perfectly. In this first-person dungeon crawler, slicing demons was satisfying, and the fast-paced gameplay kept me on my toes by forcing me to change my tactics for different enemy types. It's a great 6 or 7 hour game with a very achievable platinum trophy. '85. Devious Dungeon 2. This 2D action platformer is just so much fun and so addictive. It may look and play very similar to the first Devious Dungeon, but the sequel introduces various improvements that I appreciated the more I played. It's also a lot longer and tougher, which addressed two of my complaints from the first game. '84. Pixel Junk Shooter Ultimate. Pixel Junk Shooter melds twin-stick shooting with puzzle solving. It's slower paced than traditional twin-stick shooters and more thoughtful. I love the graphical style. Failing and repeating levels can become a bit tedious, but other than this, it's a great game on the Vita. '83. SteamWorld Dig. It took me less than 4 hours to finish SteamWorld Dig, and as soon as I finished it I wanted to jump back in and play again. It's a Metroidvania where the objective is to go downwards and explore the caverns below the robot town of Tumbleton. The gameplay is great, and the protagonist Rusty is a joy to control. SteamWorld Dig 2 improves on every aspect of 1, but SteamWorld Dig is still an excellent game and worth your time. '82. Yomawari Midnight Shadows. Both Yomawari Midnight Shadows and the first game in the series, Night Alone, are very good horror games. They perfectly nail the horror atmosphere, with slow player movement and chilling sound effects that keep you constantly on edge. Midnight Shadows is the better of the two, and I recommend playing it in the dark with headphones on, so you fully feel the scares of being a helpless child exploring a town full of monsters. '81. Flower. On Vita, Flower is just as beautiful an experience and just as calming as it was on the PS3 when it was first released. The bright graphics of the early levels look especially good on the Vita screen. The back touch controls took some getting used to, but once I got the hang of them, I found they worked really well. Number 80. Criminal Girls 2. Criminal Girls 2 surprised me. Leading up to its launch, the main thing I knew about it was the sexual content being present. I'm not a fan of this kind of content in my games, especially given I do most of my Vita gaming in public on the train. But putting the risque elements aside, there's a deep turn-based RPG with an interesting story and enjoyable battle system. For fans of turn-based RPGs, this is a really good game. '79. Forma 8. This beautiful Metroidvania has you control a little ship, exploring a deadly and seemingly desolate planet. The atmosphere was especially powerful, with areas having no music at all, just the sound of your ship clanging around as you traveled through the environment. It's not a long game, but it left me satisfied. '78. Tales from Space Mutant Blobs. Although it came out at the Vita's release, I didn't pick it up until later in 2012, which is when I realised that this is one of the best launch games on the system. It's a great 2D platformer where you play as a blob that gets its revenge on humanity by eating everything in sight. I particularly enjoyed the cartoony style graphics, the humour, and how you really felt you were controlling a gelatinous blob. '77. Child of Light. I am a fan of RPGs, although the long length of many JRPGs can sometimes put me off playing. Child of Light is a beautiful game in the genre that doesn't overstay its welcome or overly pad out its content. The world and story were especially good. '76. Fate Extella Link. I enjoyed Fate Extella Link and its prequel, Umbral Star. The Dynasty Warrior style action was a lot of fun, and both looked great on the Vita screen. I found the story in Umbral Star kinda nonsensical at times though, but Link improved on that with a much more straightforward and interesting plot. Number 75. Pato Box. Pato Box is a challenging punch-out style game that's also really unique in its style and execution. You play as a hybrid human duck boxer and go through a crazy story and totally crazy boss fights. Some of the filler content between boss fights could have been shaved down, but aside from this, it's an excellent game. '74. Frozen Synapse Prime. It took a bit of time to get used to, but Frozen Synapse Prime is a superb turn-based strategy game with really deep mechanics. It's challenging, but I found it so satisfying executing a successful plan. '73. Risk of Rain. Risk of Rain is a roguelike 2D action platformer. Travelling through this world, full of a variety of monsters, feels dangerous, and made even more so by the spectre of permanent death and losing all your progress. Despite sinking loads of hours into it, I never managed to finish it, but I did enjoy it immensely. '72. Valhalla. Valhalla is a visual novel and bartending simulation set in the future. It's a very relaxing and interesting experience, where you get to know fascinating characters and live in a very interesting world. It's great to play on the Vita, and perfect for playing in short bursts. It was nice to play a game that was just nice. There's no stress, no worry about high scores or killing enemies, it's just you being part of this world. '71. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was hands down my favourite game on the Dreamcast. I sunk so many hours into it and loved it. I found Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 just as good gameplay wise, and I loved the cast of characters. It would have appeared a lot higher in the list, but the ridiculous difficulty of the final boss spoiled what is otherwise an excellent game. 61. Number 70. Runner 2. I love the music and graphics in Runner 2. It's an auto runner where you have to constantly stay on your toes to try and jump, slide under and avoid obstacles to the rhythm of the music. It starts off pretty easy, but gets really tough. Replaying a level for the 10th time could get frustrating at times, but the excellent soundtrack made it all okay, and I found the challenge made me more determined to finish the level rather than make me give up. Street Fighter x Tekken. I've been a huge fan of Street Fighter games ever since playing Street Fighter 2 in the arcades back when I was 11. Street Fighter x Tekken is not the best Street Fighter game I've played. I consider Street Fighter 3 Third Strike to be the best one. But it's a great fighter and has so much content for solo players. Aside from the arcade mode and finishing the story for all the different characters, the online multiplayer allowed you to play with PS3 players, which helped keep the servers full for a long time. The variety of characters was excellent, having all the best Street Fighter characters and my favourites from Tekken. I really enjoyed playing all the Tekken characters in 2D and seeing how their moves translate to this new style. Number 68. Retro City Rampage. Retro City Rampage takes the gameplay style of the original Grand Theft Auto, modernizes it, and mixes in some random funny pop culture references. I had a great time with this game. Even just driving around the city and trying to find random missions, or getting into fights with the police was a lot of fun. '67. Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward. Virtue's Last Reward was my first experience of a visual novel, and it did not disappoint. The story and intrigue kept me on the edge of my seat, and I found the cast of characters to be so interesting. The escape room puzzles, which is the primary gameplay element, were probably the least interesting aspect for me. I just wanted to continue with the story and find out more about the mysterious kidnapper. '66. Rabby Ribby. Rabby Ribby is a Metroidvania with cute and colourful pixel graphics. You start the game very weak with slow movement, which I didn't enjoy for the first hour, but after unlocking new abilities and upgrades, the game becomes much faster paced and really fun. It played like a traditional 2D action platformer at times, but the boss fights mixed things up by becoming a bullet hell style game. The story was kind of convoluted, but the gameplay was just great. '65. Castle Storm. The best way to describe Castle Storm is a tower defense game mixed with Angry Birds. You need to defend your base from oncoming enemies by shooting projectiles at them, and by releasing troops to fight them. I enjoyed this game so much. It gets pretty hectic with all the enemies on screen in later levels, and you need to properly plan out the structure of your castle so that it's properly defended. I haven't played the DLC, but even just the base game has a lot of content, and the challenge kept me playing for hours and hours trying to beat every level. '64. Geometry Wars 3 Dimensions. Geometry Wars 3 is a brilliant twin-stick shooter that's easy to get to grips with but challenging to finish all 50 stages in adventure mode. There's also the obligatory survival stages, which adds longevity to the game, even after you finish adventure mode. There's a lot of content, and with the challenge of some of the boss fights, you can sink a lot of time into this game. '63. Foul Play. Foul Play is a 2D brawler kind of like Final Fight or Streets of Rage, but it takes place on a stage as the British gentleman Baron Dashforth recounts his great adventures. On the stage you travel to various scenes like Egypt or under the sea, fighting actors posing as enemies and demons. The beat-em-up gameplay is brilliant, emphasizing combos. There's no health bar. Your performance is gauged by how much the crowd is cheering, and you need to constantly perform combos to make them happy. It's a really unique style of game and also really funny. '62. Zen Pinball 2. Zen Pinball 2 doesn't get as much love as I think it deserves. Over time there have been so many new DLC tables released, and I love how they incorporate so many different franchises into a pinball game. My favourites are the Skyrim, Marvel Civil War and Spider-Man tables. Skyrim in particular is an RPG adventure, but using the pinball table to take your actions. It costs a lot to grab all the different tables, and they don't seem to go on sale enough in my opinion, but I don't think you need all of them. Just a few select good ones can keep you entertained for hours. I spent 6 hours playing just the Skyrim table on a flight once, and I still wasn't done with it. '61. Luftrausers. Luftrausers is an addictive, fun and challenging 2D shooter. The trophies have been broken since launch, which I know is rubbish, but the game itself is just so good that it didn't matter to me that I would never platinum it. The aim is to basically survive as long as possible and take out as many enemies as possible. The graphics suit the game brilliantly, and it feels awesome taking out huge numbers of enemies as the epic music builds to its crescendo.
Number 60. Super Destronaut DX. I became so addicted to Super Destronaut DX when I played it. The fun gameplay loop of racking up a high score in this arcade shooter had me totally hooked. It's not a particularly complex game, but it's a great game to play in short bursts and to chase the top of the leaderboard. I found it hard to stop playing once I started, especially when I saw the top of the leaderboard in my sights. Number 59. Downwell. I am so bad at this game, but I still love it. You play as a guy that jumps down a well wearing his gun boots. You need to survive your fall to the bottom by shooting or stomping on enemies. You can collect different weapons along the way to make your journey easier, which you'll need because the game is pretty hard, or at least I found it hard. I've never finished the game, but no matter how frustrated I got, it kept me totally hooked. And it's really cheap too. 58. Rayman Legends and Rayman Origins. Rayman Legends and Origins are both amazing examples of how 2D platformers have evolved and improved since Super Mario Bros. On the NES. The level design is really clever, pushing you to explore, but also to time your movements and attacks perfectly to take out enemies. There's a massive amount of content in these games, especially Legends. The graphics are gorgeous too, and the music really sticks with you. 57. Riddled Corpses EX. Riddled Corpses EX is a rock-hard twin-stick shooter where you face off against waves of zombies trying to take over the Earth. The game is super addictive, but also super grindy. It took me quite a lot of time to complete the game's 6 levels, but I didn't find myself getting frustrated or bored. It's a really fun game with a perfect level of challenge. Unlocking new characters and playing and saving coins for the next upgrade kept me interested in the game all the way through. If you like twin-stick shooters and don't mind a game with grinding, then I think you'll really enjoy Riddled Corpses EX. 56. Spelunky. Before I played it, I'd only heard good things about Spelunky, and it totally lived up to the hype. I remember going shopping with my wife and starting Spelunky in a coffee shop. By the time she called and said she was done, it had been 3 hours of playing, and I didn't even realise the time had passed so quickly. It's super challenging, but so easy to get lost in having just one more go. I love the graphics and gameplay and discovering all the little mysteries hidden around the levels. 55. Odin Sphere Leaf Thrizer. It may be a surprise to see this so low on the list. It's probably a testament to how many excellent games there are on the Vita. Odin Sphere looked amazing and the action gameplay was superb. I did enjoy it, but the game is super long, and I found myself getting a bit bored as I played through levels multiple times. But aside from that, and especially for the first 20 hours, I enjoyed Odin Sphere immensely. 54. Virtua Tennis. I'm not a big fan of sports games, but I thought Virtua Tennis was just brilliant. The graphics were shockingly good, especially given this was a launch game for the Vita. It's easy to pick up and play, but can get quite challenging as you progress in the career mode, and there's so much to do in this game. Aside from career mode that has you travelling around the world competing in tennis tournaments, there are loads of minigames to try out. With matches lasting just a few minutes, this is an excellent game to take on the go. It's not available to download anymore, but if you can find a physical copy, this is definitely a game worth playing. '53. Little Big Planet. I'm just gonna say it, Little Big Planet Vita is better than Little Big Planet 1 and 2 on the PS3.
The single player campaign is surprisingly good, with a story that had me curious to see it to the end, and totally varied levels and worlds to explore. Like most Sony first-party games from the Vita's launch year, it used the Vita's touchscreen, but not in a way that was intrusive to the game. There are also over 300,000 user-created levels to play. Not all of them are great, but there are some real gems out there and some very clever creations. It's so easy to get lost in all the content available. 52. Xenon Valkyrie Plus. The best way I can describe Xenon Valkyrie Plus is a sci-fi spelunky. It's got a very similar gameplay loop, but you're traversing alien planets using your laser gun and sword to slay aliens. I love this game, and although I found similarities in some aspects with Spelunky, I think this is the better game. The style, graphics, action and gameplay were great, but be prepared for a challenge. #51. Super Meat Boy. This 2D platformer is infuriatingly hard. Learning the feel of controlling Super Meat Boy takes some getting used to. I would often get frustrated, but Super Meat Boy is so addictive that I couldn't put it down, and there's a great feeling of satisfaction when you beat a tough level. It's another game that is, in my opinion, perfect for a handheld. The levels are short and great for quick burst gaming. Number 50. Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight and Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight. I loved these two games when I played the Japanese versions in 2018. The songs are all excellent and the gameplay is so fun and addictive. Now that I've played the Western releases with the English dub, I love the games even more. They may not have a traditional story mode to play through, but after I played and enjoyed Persona 5 and part of Persona 3, it's just so nice to be playing a game with these characters again. I also bought the season pass of songs, which had some great tracks to supplement the already excellent list of songs. Rhythm games may not be for everyone, but I just love these games. If the file sizes weren't so big, I would keep them on my Vita permanently. #49. Soul Sacrifice Delta. Soul Sacrifice Delta is one of the best examples of AAA gaming on the Vita. Facing off against massive bosses in this 3D action game was just amazing for a handheld in 2013. There were so many systems to learn and figure out, and so much content to play through. I had a lot of fun going online too and facing off with some of the tough bosses that were impossible to beat alone. The Delta version added so much content and additional bosses, and I loved the dark and tragic story that had you spending the game preparing and growing stronger to eventually take on the evil wizard Magusar. That final boss fight was so memorable. #48. Dragon Quest Heroes 2. Dragon Quest Heroes 2 is a Japanese game, and I wouldn't generally include an import game on a list like this, especially since I can't read the text, but I felt I had to include it because it's just so good. It's a Dynasty Warriors style game, but with open maps full of enemies to kill and treasure to find. The graphics are amazing, some of the best for the Vita, and even without knowing Japanese, it's still easy to figure out how to play and what to do. The game feels great to play and I really enjoyed the music. I recently hacked my Vita and downloaded the translation patch for the game. I'm looking forward to playing it again and knowing what's going on. #47. The Longest 5 Minutes. The Longest 5 Minutes was an excellent game. It's an old school RPG that boils down the traditional 30 to 40 hour length to 12 hours by cutting out the filler content and focusing on the big story events. The game is a bit too easy, but the story and characters were so charming and enjoyable that the easy gameplay didn't matter to me. This is a game especially targeted to fans of old school RPGs, who will enjoy the references to games they know and love, while also seeing the common tropes of the genre turned on their head. #46. Reverie. Reverie is a superb blend of the style of Earthbound and the gameplay of Link to the Past. Sure, it's a bit short, and not that difficult, but it's so charming and well designed. It's nice to play a game like Reverie that doesn't take dozens of hours to beat, and is just pure fun. The pixel graphics and soundtrack suited the game perfectly, and had me humming the main tune for hours after playing. #45. Fez. I love pixel graphics, and Fez has some of the best for any game I've ever played. The mechanic of spinning the world in order to find secrets and to progress is so clever. I was not able to solve all the puzzles, and I didn't even want to. I had a great time playing Fez, that forcing myself to play longer may have spoiled the experience. Whether you like challenging puzzles, or want a fun 2D platformer, Fez is both of these things. "44. Hotline Miami. Stylish, addictive, over-the-top and action-packed. The gameplay here is just brilliant. I would normally enter a level and try to take out the bad guys stealthily, which would eventually fail, and then I would approach the remainder of the level all guns blazing. Something I really appreciated was how when you die, the time to reload and start again was so short. It makes other games that make you wait to get back into the action just seem slow and annoying. I recommend Hotline Miami 1 over number 2. The levels for 2 were bigger, and so many times I got killed from an enemy off screen. Hotline Miami 1's levels were much better designed, where death felt fair, and was normally due to a mistake I made or due to me reacting too slow or not anticipating an enemy's actions. Even when you finish the game, there's still a lot of fun to be had replaying levels to get the top ranking. 43. Bastion. Bastion was one of the reasons I bought an Xbox 360 all those years ago. While I played and loved it on the 360, I much preferred having it on the go on my Vita. It was just as fun on the Vita, and the graphics looked amazing, especially on the OLED screen. This top-down action game is excellent, with varied weapons to take on enemies and a solid level of challenge. The story, music and narration are highlights though. After playing the game, I went and bought the soundtrack from iTunes because I loved it so much. "42. World of Final Fantasy. As a Final Fantasy fan, I really appreciated all the bits of fan service in World of Final Fantasy, but this wasn't the only reason I enjoyed the game. In my review I talked about how the characters were a bit annoying at first, but after a while they totally clicked with me, and I found the protagonists, Lan and Rain, entertaining, and I was genuinely interested in the story. The turn-based gameplay wasn't revolutionary, even though it probably wanted to be, by having monsters capturable and stacking them on top of the characters to raise the party's strength. It was really the story and seeing all the Final Fantasy characters show up that made the game so enjoyable for me. I also really like the music and the updated versions of classic Final Fantasy songs. There is slowdown though on the Vita version, and the graphics are a bit pixelated, but it didn't spoil the game for me. "41. Pixel Junk Monsters Deluxe HD. Pixel Junk Monsters is the best tower defense game I've ever played. The cute graphics and upbeat soundtrack lull you into a full sense of security before you realize how tough the game really is. The aim is to keep your babies alive by creating and upgrading towers to kill waves of monsters, and it can be so frustrating getting to the penultimate wave of monsters and seeing one of your babies picked off and ruining your perfect run. But I enjoyed the game so much I would just sigh and hit restart. It's got some ridiculously hard trophies. I've only got 1 trophy in total from the game, but it's a game I still come back to, and it's one I don't intend to ever remove from my Vita. Number 40. Metal Gear Solid HD Collection. When the Metal Gear Solid Collection came out just a few months after the Vita's release, it had me so excited for the possibility of HD remakes of other PS2 games, like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy XII. We did get some PS2 HD re-releases, but not all the games I would have wanted. Among the ones we did get, the Metal Gear Solid Collection stands out as one of the best remakes of a PS2 game. The graphics look amazing, the gameplay is still superb, and the use of the Vita's touchscreen feels natural rather than shoehorned in. I don't feel that Metal Gear Solid 2 is aged all that well, especially with the fixed cameras. But Metal Gear Solid 3 is still an excellent game, in terms of story, characters, gameplay and bosses, and it alone justifies the price tag for this collection. 39. Muramasa Rebirth. Gorgeous graphics and excellent 2D action make Muramasa a great game to sink time into. There are 2 stories to play through in the base game that take the 2 protagonists through Japan, taking on evil ninjas and hideous monsters, and even the gods themselves. The plot can be kinda convoluted, but the fast-paced gameplay more than makes up for it. It can be pretty difficult to fight some of the bosses and the optional challenge caves, but I also found it quite addictive trying to collect all 108 swords. The 4 DLC packs with new stories, new bosses and new protagonists is also worth grabbing. Where some DLC can be a bit superficial, the 4 additional packs add a good amount of extra content. 38. Danganronpa 2. There aren't many visual novels in my top 100. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I associate reading with going to bed, so I tend to get tired when just reading. Most visual novels aren't able to hold my attention, but Danganronpa 1 and 2 are games that had me hooked and kept me at the edge of my seat at all the twists and turns and crazy events. Both games are great, and so unique in their premise of high school students being trapped and needing to murder each other to escape. I personally prefer Danganronpa 1 over 2, which is why it appears higher on my list, but both games should be played, and in order. "37. Super Time Force Ultra. The rewind mechanic is so clever in this 2D shooter platformer. The objective is deceptively straightforward. You choose your character from a range of fighters, and you need to get to the end of a level and kill the boss in 1 minute. Trying to do this with just one person, essentially one life, is pretty much impossible. At least I found it impossible. As you die, you get to rewind the level and place another character to start off at any point in the level, so you can build on the progress of the preceding characters, and by rewinding and adding more characters, you can eventually finish a level. So that 1 minute level can actually take around 15 to 20 minutes to finish by the time you get through it. Planning ahead and figuring out the proper placement of characters and how to get them to work together adds a lot of depth and strategy, and the pixel graphics are great. The only drawback is the slowdown on the Vita when there's lots of action on screen, but otherwise it's a deep and enjoyable game. 36. Grand Kingdom. There is so much to do in Grand Kingdom. This strategy RPG has you recruit a variety of soldiers and take them on missions moving across a grid with the aim of completing your mission within a set number of turns. You fight enemies along the way in turn-based battles that could get pretty difficult at times. The story was kind of inconsequential, and some of the game's elements were not well explained, like the online battles, but I love the options and variety of warriors to recruit. You've got the standard Knight, Mage, Archer character classes, but you've also got Beast Riders, which are my favourite. There's so much content in this game, and playing through it all will keep you entertained for dozens of hours. "35. Dragon Quest Builders. I find it amazing that this game plays so well on the Vita. The graphics look great, and the open world where you can build any structure is so impressive. I couldn't get into Minecraft, but in Dragon Quest Builders, I love the mission structure that helps you get to grips with building mechanics, exploring, and battling. There are 4 worlds to complete. Once you finish all the missions in a world, you can move on to the next one. But I enjoyed just lingering and experimenting and building more structures. It's a shame Dragon Quest Builders 2 didn't make it to Vita, but 1 is such a great game and so enjoyable. Number 34. Binding of Isaac. Binding of Isaac is one of the best twin-stick shooters on the Vita. The procedurally generated dungeons has you fighting through rooms full of monsters with loads of different weapons and power-ups to collect, although some of the power-ups can actually make things harder for you. It's a roguelike, so when you die you start right back at the beginning. It took me many tries to eventually finish the game, but there are so many characters to unlock that I just jumped straight back in and kept playing. It's so easy to jump in for a quick go, and it's just so much fun. This is another game I don't intend to ever delete from my Vita. Number 33. Ys Origin. Ys Origin was the first Ys game I played, and I was really surprised at how much I loved it. This fast-paced 2D action RPG was just so much fun to play, and despite not playing previous games in the series, I enjoyed the story and characters. The graphics do look pretty dated, as this is a re-release of a pretty old game, but the gameplay holds up perfectly, and the soundtrack was great. "32. Papers, Please. Papers, Please has you playing the role of a depressingly poor border control officer for the country of Arstotzka. You need to check the passports and visas of people wanting to enter the country, and make sure you don't let anyone in that shouldn't be there. It probably sounds kinda boring just from the high-level description of the game, but there are so many layers to Papers, Please. The start of the game has you only really looking at whether the passports have expired or not, but as you progress, there are new rules brought in to complicate your review of the documents. You'll need to check visas match what people are saying, check x-rays of people for weapons, look at fingerprints to make sure people are who they say they are, and much more. Each person you review and make the correct decision on gives you credits, which you need to pay for rent, food and heating in order for you and your family to survive. If you ever go into negative money, it's game over. The story and options develop over time, giving you the option to take bribes to keep your family fed, or you could even choose to help overthrow the government. The graphics may not look like much, but this is a deep game that tests your brain, memory and morals. 31. Neurovoider. The developer's description of Neurovoider is: Neurovoider is a twin-stick shooter RPG set in a cyber-futuristic world about brains shooting evil robots with nuclear rocket launchers. That is a perfect description. This is one of the most fun twin-stick shooters I've ever played. There's so much customization and variety of weapons. The gameplay is easy to pick up and play, and it's just really enjoyable. I had such a good time playing Neurovoider, and it's another game I'll return to often. The bosses are particularly difficult, but it's just so addictive trying again and again to beat them. If you like twin-stick shooters, then this is well worth checking out.
Number 30. Persona 4 Dancing All Night. I'm a huge fan of Persona 4 Golden and its music. Persona 4 Dancing All Night is a rhythm game with remixed tracks from the main game that I just couldn't stop playing. Even after I got the platinum, I continued to play, because I just enjoyed it so much. The story wasn't great, but after Persona 4 Golden, I was just happy to have another story with the same characters that I knew so well from Golden, which made it a real pleasure to play. The platinum is very grindy, and has you replaying songs over and over to earn enough money to buy all items in the game shop. I guess it shows how much I love the game and the music that I put in all that time to actually platinum the game. Number 29. Wipeout 2048. It's so impressive how well this launch game still holds up. The graphics look great and the sense of speed is amazing. There's a decent amount of variety to the tracks and the missions for each level of the campaign. I really enjoyed the PSP Wipeout games, but 2048 was so much better, with wider tracks and more emphasis on combat, which I found so much more fun. It's a shame that online servers have been shut down, but Wipeout 2048 still holds up as an excellent racing game, with lots of content and challenge to make it a great game even for solo players. '28. Uncharted Golden Abyss. Uncharted Golden Abyss was the first game I played when I bought my Vita. As a fan of the PS3 Uncharted games, I was blown away by how good Golden Abyss was, and how it truly was the Uncharted experience on a handheld. It wasn't perfect. The touchscreen puzzles, use of camera, and the gyroscope for aiming were needless additions. But aside from these elements, the platforming and shooting perfectly mirrored the console games in the series. I enjoyed the stories too and the character interactions. As a launch game, it really set the benchmark for what the Vita was capable of, and it still holds up as one of the best games on the system. '27. Unit 13. It may be surprising to see this higher on my list than Uncharted Golden Abyss, but I thought Unit 13 was superb. It was the gameplay of a console third-person shooter, but with levels designed to be short and perfect for playing on the go. Completing the game wasn't easy, but this was a game I loved so much that I obtained the platinum. There's a great sense of satisfaction to mastering a mission and being able to stealth kill all the enemies, while quickly moving from objective to objective and finally attaining the top score. I don't understand why this didn't get better reviews when it came out. A 3D shooter designed to be played on a handheld, with variety of missions, soldiers and weapons, should have been a major seller for the Vita. It was also a good game for co-op, and for me it was the first time the built-in mic on the Vita actually came in handy. Number 26. Sound Shapes. The first time I played Sound Shapes, I didn't appreciate it. I rushed through it to get the platinum on the first weekend when it was released, and didn't really think much of the game itself. I replayed it when I was writing my first book, and realised how special this game truly is. The soundtrack is brilliant, and it's great how the platforming and collecting circles adds new beats and develops the track over a series of screens. The graphics too are just beautiful, and suit the music perfectly. The servers are closed down now, so all the user-created levels are gone, but even without them, the base game is worth playing. Aside from the core game, there are 2 additional modes,
Beat School and Death Mode. In Death Mode you need to complete a single screen level with loads of deadly obstacles. Death Mode was super frustrating and difficult as you'd expect from the name, but also very satisfying to finally finish a tough level after dozens of tries. "25. Gravity Rush. I wish Gravity Rush 2 had come to the Vita. Number 1 was an excellent game with such a likeable protagonist in Cat. Flying around the city searching for gems and completing missions was so much fun, and I appreciated how upgrading Cat made her feel much better to control. The story was really interesting, and although the controls could be a little fiddly when battling, it was such a fresh experience and unique world that makes Gravity Rush one of my favourite games on the Vita. "24. Guacamelee. I've long been a fan of 2D Metroidvanias, and Guacamelee is a great game in the genre. You play the role of a Mexican luchador, fighting to save the woman he loves from an evil skeleton. I was a big fan of the cartoony graphics, and the gameplay was brilliant. The tight controls were designed to force you to change up your attacks for different enemies, which really kept me on my toes. There were some great boss battles too. It's not especially long, but I thought it was the perfect length to leave me wanting more." 23. Rainbow Skies. I was so impressed with Rainbow Skies when I played it. It's a strategy RPG that improves massively on its predecessor Rainbow Moon. The graphics and music were great, and the complex gameplay systems were well designed. The story was a bit slow to get going, but became interesting later on. It's a super long game, so make sure you set aside around 90 hours to finish it. This is a hardcore RPG, so expect a challenge and expect to grind to get through some of the tough battles. I don't think this is a game for everyone, but if you're a fan of long RPGs with a challenge, like me, then Rainbow Skies is a game for you. 22. Crypt of the Necrodancer. I didn't play Crypt of the Necrodancer when it first came out. I had heard good things about it, but I waited until it was on sale. After one go, I was in love. It's such a smart and unique game, where you take on hordes of monsters as you make your way through procedurally generated dungeons to the beat of the music. There's so much to unlock and discover, and the controls are simple, making it easy to figure out how to play, letting the challenge come from the variety of enemies that you face. It's so addictive too. Once I started playing, it's hard to stop, and even months later I'm humming some of the excellent tunes. 21. Time Spinner. Another Metroidvania on my list. Time Spinner has you play as Luna, as she travels to different time periods to stop the evil empire responsible for the death of her mother. It's been compared to Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which is a massive compliment. I don't think it's quite as good overall as Symphony of the Night, but it's a brilliant game, and from a controls perspective, especially later in the game when you unlock all the upgrades, it's more fun to play, explore and dash around. The pixel graphics were especially good, as was the soundtrack. Time Spinner got some negative buzz at release, due to performance issues on the Vita version. These were patched out later, so if you do play it now, then know that you won't have any issues. It's a shame we won't be getting Bloodstained on the Vita, but at least we have Time Spinner to satisfy our Metroidvania needs. Number 20. Cladden Returns. This is Sengoku. I didn't know much about Cladden Returns when I started playing it. I had seen a trailer, and I liked the historical Japanese setting, pixel graphics and 8-bit soundtrack. But beyond that, I didn't really know what type of game it was, so I was really surprised at how much I loved it. It's a top-down action RPG dungeon explorer that's fun to play and super challenging in the later levels. There's so much to do in this game, and even when you finish the main levels, there are bonus levels and a 99-floor roguelike dungeon to explore. It's a shame there wasn't a Western physical release, which I think explains why so many people haven't played it, but it's an excellent game if you give it a chance. 19. Killzone Mercenary. Part of the selling point of the Vita was the second analog stick, which would allow first-person shooters to be truly playable on the go. Killzone Mercenary was the game that truly demonstrated how good the Vita was for first-person shooters. The graphics are still some of the best for the system, and the gameplay was superb. There was a lot of variety to the missions, and this was the first Killzone game where I was actually interested in the story. As you play, you earn credits for pretty much anything you do, and you can use them to buy new weapons and accessories. There was so much variety to the weapons and the options for loadouts. I preferred the stealth approach, using my temporary invisibility cloak and silenced guns, but you could go all guns blazing with shotguns and rocket launchers if you preferred. It wasn't especially long, but with the multiplayer, variety of challenges for the single player levels, and bot zone that allows you to play the multiplayer maps against the computer controlled enemies, there was a lot of reason to keep playing after you finish the game. 18. SteamWorld Heist. SteamWorld Heist is a tactical RPG, kind of like XCOM, but in 2D. It's set in space and follows Captain Piper and her crew as they take on evil pirates and the evil Red Queen. The gameplay was easy to get to grips with, and the short levels make it perfect for a handheld. It's also really addictive. Whenever I failed a level, I would jump back in and try again. The characters are varied and their powers really make them feel distinct and useful. I finished the game, but I haven't deleted it from my Vita. I've come back to it a few times, and I'm happy to keep playing it and slowly make my way to the platinum. "17. Freedom Wars. The premise for Freedom Wars is so unique. Set in the future where humans are considered a drain on resources and forced to fight giant monsters in order to reduce their sentence to zero was so cool. The gameplay involved using a sword and gun to take down these mechanical beasts and chop off their body parts to collect them for your city, called a panopticon. Individually, the shooting and melee combat weren't brilliant, but together the gameplay worked well, and I loved making my way through the story. It took me around 30 hours before I reached a point where I couldn't beat levels anymore because they became too difficult. But going online a few months ago, there was still a really dedicated and helpful community of players that made those tough levels manageable. This is another example of AAA gaming on the go, and a must-own game for Vita fans. "16. Iconoclasts. Iconoclast is a 2D action platformer with a big emphasis on the dark story. The well-delivered plot was perfectly supported by amazing gameplay, level design, graphics, and music. It has over 20 bosses that I found really interesting to fight. They were designed like mini puzzles to figure out how to beat them. If you like 2D Metroidvanias or story-driven games, then I definitely recommend picking up Iconoclasts. "15. Shiren the Wanderer. Shiren the Wanderer is a top-down RPG roguelike game where you venture into an increasingly difficult set of randomly generated levels, fighting monsters while trying to reach the top of the tower. The game is hard, frustrating, and dense at first. After the first few hours, I was close to just giving up on it, but I'm so glad I didn't. Once you understand the game, you begin to appreciate how all the mechanics work together, and Shiren the Wanderer just clicked for me. It's definitely not a game for everyone, but if you're a fan of roguelike games, and also tough games like Dark Souls, then you'll probably like Shiren. "14. Shovel Knight. I loved Shovel Knight when I first played it, and with the extra content released over time, this game has just gotten better and better. The 2D action platformer feels perfect to play, and Shovel Knight controls so well. The music, graphics, and story are all excellent, and the Spectre Knight story content, which was released in 2017, really added to the game's story. Spectre Knight was even more fun to control. As a fan of 2D retro games like Mega Man 2 and Super Mario Bros. 3, Shovel Knight feels like the perfect modern evolution that incorporates modern game mechanics into a retro game design. Also, the variety of bosses are brilliant. "13. Velocity 2X. I was a big fan of Velocity Ultra on my Vita, and 2X was even better. It's kind of a cross between a 2D action game and scrolling shoot 'em up, but the emphasis is on speed and accuracy. Getting through a level within a time limit, killing all enemies, and collecting all the pods can be tricky, but also very satisfying to get a perfect on a tough level. I also enjoyed the boss battles, which turned the game into a bullet hell shooter. It's a smart and unique game that changes up the shooter genre and also has a really cool sci-fi soundtrack. "12. MotorStorm RC. MotorStorm RC was one of the first games I bought for my Vita, and it's still one of my favourite. It's a racing game where you control an RC car through races or time trials, with stages themed around the levels of the console MotorStorm games. It's so much fun racing the cars around, and there's a great attention to detail. It can be pretty challenging, but that feeling of accomplishment when you scrape victory on a tough track makes it worth it. "11. Deadbolt. In Deadbolt, you play as the Reaper, and it's your job to hunt monsters like zombies, vampires and skeletons, and return them to hell. The gameplay involves entering a building full of the undead, and using weapons you find along the way to kill them all and complete your objective. Each level is like a puzzle, and trying to figure out the best approach, and which enemy to kill first and how, can take a lot of trial and error. I didn't mind replaying levels though, and the trial and error was fine with me, because finishing a level perfectly makes you feel like a badass. The game just has so much style. It's challenging but also very satisfying. The graphics, music, gameplay and story all just work so well together." When I was putting together the list, I went through all the Vita games I had played. I shaved it down to 100, but here are 10 that just missed the top 100. These are in no particular order, by the way. I Am the Hero. I Am the Hero was a lot of fun. The controls were a bit awkward, but other than that, it was a very good game with some great pixel graphics. Metagal. Metagal is basically a Mega Man clone, but it's a really good clone. It's not a very long game, but it controls well and the boss powers that you obtain add some very cool variety to the gameplay. It's very short though, and once I finished it, even though I unlocked new characters, I didn't feel like I wanted to play it again. Rogue Aces. Rogue Aces is a really good 2D shooter. There's a lot to do and it's fun to play. When I first played it, I thought it was better than Luftrausers, which has similar 2D shooter gameplay. But I find Rogue Legacy is just not as addictive as Luftrausers, and the straightforward mission objectives from Luftrausers make it much more friendlier for pick up and play sessions. So I ended up leaving Rogue Legacy off my top 100. Limbo. This atmospheric 2D platformer isn't particularly long, but it's really unique in its style and execution, or at least it was unique at the time it came out. I like Limbo, but I feel like it's a one and done game, and not something I'd return to. I also feel like it was so hyped up that when I played it, my expectations were just too high, so for me it didn't make the top 100. Thomas Was Alone. Entertaining, but short, and with great narration. It's not a game with much replay value, but it's fun while it lasts. Shu. Shu is a 2D platformer with a lot of variety and clever level design. The Vita has a lot of great 2D platformers, and while Shu is a good game, I didn't feel it was as good as some others. Halloween Forever. I had fun playing Halloween Forever. It's a little short, but it plays well with some cool pixel graphics. I think if there was more to do and more levels, it would have made the top 100. Trails of Cold Steel. It may be surprising seeing this not make it into the top 100. I haven't finished Trails of Cold Steel, so I didn't feel like I could add it to the list. I played around 15 hours before I discovered Cryptid the Necrodancer, and then I just didn't go back. I do intend to go back eventually, and I was enjoying it, but Cryptid the Necrodancer was just so much better that it made me totally forget about Trails of Cold Steel. Ollie Ollie 2. Ollie Ollie 2 was a fun skating game. I enjoyed it, but I was pretty bad at it, and replaying levels again and again and again eventually got old. Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds. Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds is a decent old school brawler. This is another game that I started and enjoyed, but I haven't played it enough for it to qualify for the top 100. It's a good game though from what I've played so far. Number 10. Need for Speed Most Wanted. Need for Speed Most Wanted is probably my favourite racing game of all time. You've got various cars to unlock and races to compete in, as is normal for a racing game, but having an open world city to drive around and explore was just so much fun. I could happily just spend time getting into police chases or driving past speed cameras to get a higher score than my PSN friends. I found the races thrilling. Edging past the other cars to claim first place in a race was super exciting, and I loved finding new sports cars to open up new races and missions. There are so many cars and so many race events. Although I've played for so many hours already, it's another game I intend to keep on my Vita so that I can return to it again and again. Number 9. Dragon's Crown. Dragon's Crown is a fantasy action game, kind of like a modern version of Golden Axe. You choose one of 6 warriors that all feel distinct in their playstyle, and embark on levels battling monsters, wizards and dragons. The gameplay and graphics are superb, and I love the fantasy setting. It's made by Atlas, as is Odin Sphere and Muramasa, but Dragon's Crown earns a higher spot for me than those games, with its online co-op mode that lets you play with other Vita, PS3 and PS4 players, which I found added so much longevity to the game. Number 8. Rogue Legacy. Rogue Legacy makes the top 10 despite the fact that I couldn't beat it. It's a brilliant 2D action platformer that felt great to play and was so addictive. The procedurally generated dungeons and random character abilities for each playthrough made each run feel different, so that I didn't get bored even after dozens of hours of playing. I also really enjoyed the pixel graphics and upgrade system, where you earn gold to unlock new abilities or stat upgrades. It's super tough, but also super fun. Number 7. Persona 4 Golden. What can I say about Persona 4 Golden that hasn't already been said? It is frequently on the Vita's list of best games, and I've never spoken to anyone that didn't love it. If you don't know what it is, it's an RPG set in a Japanese town where you need to solve a series of murders with your friends. The friendships are what really make the game special. Battling in dungeons was the least interesting part of the game for me. Hanging out with the group of friends and learning more about them was the real draw. It was such a memorable game, and it's easy to see why this is often considered one of the best games on the system. I spent 70 hours playing it, and after I finished I considered restarting it straight away, just so I could spend more time in this world and develop more of the friendships. Number 6. Danganronpa. I was not prepared for Danganronpa when I started it. I knew the premise of the game, students trapped in a school and forced to murder each other for their freedom. As I said in a previous video, both this and Danganronpa 2 are excellent games, but Danganronpa 1 felt more fresh, and the reveals were harder to predict than 2, which is why it's higher on my list. The characters and story were so memorable, especially the murderous teddy bear Monokuma. The only real gameplay element came in the form of the class trials, where you try and figure out the murderer. I loved how the reveals were truly shocking at times, and how the game subverted expectations again and again. I'm not a huge fan of visual novels in general, but this game was just so good. Number 5. Undertale. Undertale is so unique and so impressive. It's a turn-based RPG and bullet hell game that has you control the hero as they journey back through the underworld to get home. The story is brilliant and so touching, but it's also different from pretty much every game I've ever played, for giving you the option of killing enemies or trying to resolve fights peacefully, and the decision how to handle battles can have a huge impact on the story. Every part of Undertale just works. It could be criticized for the tough battles, especially towards the end of the game, but even the moments where you struggle just spur you onwards and bolster your determination. The journey is as touching and memorable as the ending, assuming like me you try for the good ending. If you let it get its hooks in you, you'll find that it's an amazing and memorable experience. 4. Salt and Sanctuary. When I first heard about Salt and Sanctuary, the idea of a 2D Souls game on Vita was so exciting, and fortunately, it surpassed my expectations. It is very much a 2D Souls clone, but it's done so well that I ended up being obsessed with it from the moment I started until the end credits ran. For a game like this, the controls are so important, and the developers did a great job of translating the controls and feel of Dark Souls to 2D. The atmosphere and style are great too, with dark and dreary graphics, and intimidating bosses that make you feel the weight of the game's difficulty. The Vita version doesn't allow online co-op, which is a shame, but even without it, it's still an excellent game. Three. SteamWorld Dig 2. Getting the jump right in a 2D platformer is so important, and fortunately SteamWorld Dig 2 gets it just right and feels perfect to control. The fun and fluid gameplay is the best aspect of the game, but the story, art style and music complement each other perfectly to create one of the best games on the Vita. The world and different environments are a joy to explore. It's a game so enjoyable that you won't want it to end, and with all the secrets and collectibles, your playtime can be considerably extended. If you're new to the series, you should pick up and play the earlier games first, but to me this is definitely the best game in the SteamWorld series. Two. Darkest Dungeon. I've been playing turn-based RPGs for years, but Darkest Dungeon is the most unique take on the genre. You take a team of 4 warriors into various dungeons to complete quests and collect loot to eventually take on the beasts in the Darkest Dungeon. It's difficult and unforgiving, and it can be frustrating at times when things go badly, but there's a great sense of achievement from just surviving a tough fight. The narration is brilliant and adds to the horror and sense of foreboding, as does the sound effects. They are so realistic. It's like you can feel every slice of an enemy's claw. I finished it after 60 hours of playing, but happily started it again when I bought the collector's edition, so that I could fully play through all the additional content. Number 1. Ys 8. Ys 8 just blew me away when it came out. The graphics and gameplay were superb. In my opinion, it's the best looking game on the Vita. It's such a big step up from Ys Memories of Celceta. The story was interesting, and exploring the beautiful island full of monsters didn't get old. The fast-paced action gameplay was my favourite aspect though. It was easy to get into, and the controls were intuitive, but the game is also challenging at times, forcing me to stay on my toes. The music is also excellent. I had only played Ys Origins in the Ys series before I played this. Don't be put off by the number 8 in the title too. This isn't just a great game on the Vita, it's a great game period, and a must-play for Vita fans. So guys, that's my top 100 list. Thank you for watching the series, and thank you for all the guys who have commented. These kinds of lists are very much personal opinion, so it's great to see the positive comments, even if you don't agree with my placement of the games. So now that the list is done, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the top 100. And what would you put in your top 10? Leave a comment below, and as always, thanks for watching.